The conversation you are about to hear was recorded in 2020 during the height of the global pandemic. And now, Global Comedy Studios presents, Is This a Bad Time to Talk?
All right, this is Ali. I'm about to call Gianmarco Soresi, a young stand-up comic, very talented. He's just got a new show on Netflix called Shelf Life. He's a stand-up comedian. He's done stuff at the People's Improv Theater. Very nice young man, very talented, very driven. So let me find his number on my phone and make this connection using this app that I have. Okay, so I'm going to call. Hello?
Yes.
Gianmarco Soresi?
Shalom.
Shalom. Is this a bad time to talk?
I can clear a few things.
Thank you. This is Ali. Hey, man, I appreciate you doing this. I really do, man.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Bonnie Q. Harris, who I've been working with, she said, Gianmarco's got this new Netflix special. You should check it out, and he might be a good guest to have on this thing you're doing. And I said,
sure.
I'd love to talk to him. I remember Gianmarco. I tore his pants a few times and had to pay for them.
Indeed. It's I wish it was a Netflix. It was an Amazon special, actually. But feel free to conflate it however you want.
Amazon, Netflix, you're right there, my friend. You're knocking on heaven's door.
Thank you.
You're out there. You made content during this pandemic. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, man. Not easy. That's for fucking sure.
I bet. And as we're talking right now, it is, I have to just tell you, this phone call is being recorded. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, I'm always down to be immortalized.
I love it, man. That's what we're all looking for, immortality. And it may be posted, but it is being recorded, just so you know. And it's November 4th, 2020, and we are on the cusp of finding out, who the next president will be. And it looks like, this is not a political show by any means, but it seems like Biden is close to actually, winning.
Yeah, it looks like it. I guess we'll see if we know tonight, and then we'll see if it is Biden, but we're going to go through 2 months of lawsuits and feel a little nervous.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yes.
I was very young for the 2000 election. I remember my mom, I was at like an acting camp. I was very young, 12. And she came late to pick me up, and she was like, I said, who won the election? Because in school, they were like, it's either going to be Bush or Gore. And she was like, we don't know. And it was like a weird moment as a kid being like, what do you mean? What happened? So I don't know how stressful that was for you guys who were aware.
I was fairly aware. I guess 2000 put me roughly at around 30, 32 or something, or 33. So my 32, I think. And I guess I was, an adult, and I was just like, why is Gore not fighting this? What is this? It's better for the country if I step down talk.
Sure.
That was my attitude. I was in New York City, and it was 2000, and I guess, yeah. But I tried to look you up on Wikipedia because I like to read about the folks I'm talking to, and there is no Wikipedia page for you.
No, I have not reached Wikipedia status yet. Maybe in a year.
But can't you just make your own or have someone do it for you?
I don't know. It's one of those that, like, if you do it too early and there's not enough to say, it looks like you made it yourself. So, like, if I have a couple more articles to cite, then I think maybe I would do it or get someone to do it so people couldn't tell it was me. You have one, yeah?
Yeah, but I had nothing to do with it. Someone else somehow did it. I don't know who did it. I don't know who put the stuff there. We had to correct some of the stuff. And then,
Sure.
people, and, I don't know, people can do whatever they want. They can say up stuff, make up stuff. And if you're not watching it, you're like, someone went into my Wikipedia page and tried to be a comic or tried to be a thorn or whatever.
Sure.
But what can you do?
Of course.
I watched a lot of your stuff, though. All of it funny, and, you're just a natural-born comedian. I don't know if you say natural. You obviously work hard. But you do have that kind of stand-up comedian kind of old-school feel,
Yeah.
I guess I want to go through the bifurcation points, the places along your life where it started becoming apparent. Because I know a lot of the stuff that I saw your moth storytelling. I saw a lot of storytelling stuff you did. I saw Shelf Life. I saw a lot of the stand-up you've done. So I mean, we can chat a little bit about that. But when was the time when you were younger where you were like, it? You know, you mentioned your mom at 12 taking you to acting camp around 2000. When did it start for you?
I was always from day one, I had some need to be witnessed. My parents were divorced. They got divorced before I was 1. So, but I remember as a kid, we used to like dance in the living room. My dad would put on like disco music, and we would dance. And I told them individually, I said, we have to get our living room on a stage so people can watch us dance. So there was like some like deep desire from day one to, I was enjoying myself, but it did not feel complete unless there were people also witnessing it. So I was a theater kid from the get. I remember doing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in kindergarten. In first grade, I did Princess and the Pea, and I was the prince. And at some point, I told the princess, like, I love you. And I turned to the audience, and it was really popular at the time. We would stick a finger in our mouth and go, bleh. And I improvised that, if you will, and got a huge pop. And I was like, oh, this is it. So I was a theater kid. I knew this is what I wanted to do professionally from the beginning. If I had parents more inclined to be a stage mom or stage dad, I think I would have leapt at the chance to be a Disney Channel kid, and you know, who knows what drugs I'd be addicted to now if my life had taken that path.
And so, you know, you mentioned in your stand-up, and you just mentioned here that your parents, you know, divorced when, I think in your stand-up you say after 7 days, or in the first year you were just telling me. So there's no sense of in the beginning growing up with that family dynamic. You're already in the beginning, all you know is 2 different parents and 2 different household type situations.
Yeah, I think there's a big aspect of life that's like hard to grasp, or I remember going to my friends' homes and seeing how it worked. But I went back and forth from the beginning. My dad's house was the fun, party, indulgent house. My mom's might have been like that too, but she married someone very different from my father. He was actually my father's former lawyer. And she married him, and he was from Ohio, and he was strict. My dad was from Chicago and then lived in New York, and it was 2 very different homes. And then later on, when I was 19, I think I got to see my mom and my stepdad get divorced and kind of witness what it does to my younger siblings to like go through a divorce when you're 13, 16, 18. So I really got the full divorce experience.
And did you feel like you had to be someone who needed to make everyone laugh around you to lighten the load, or was that just something you were naturally doing anyway?
I think it's what I was naturally doing anyway. I think my dad has a sense of humor. He's a hack, but he like has charisma. He had a temper. So I think like part of me being humorous was like dealing with my father's temper. He wasn't a hitter, thank God, but he was a yeller. And I feel like my sense of humor operated differently at either house. At my dad's house, it was kind of to lighten the mood, keep things light, so he didn't enter his kind of angry mode. And then at my mom's house, it was like my stepfather was strict and boring as hell, and being funny was just a way to like make dinner bearable in this kind of loveless, cold household. So yeah, I don't know. I think just being funny is also in school. I was like an awkward kid. I was terrible at sports. I was chubby until I kind of grew very tall in high school. So I think just comedy helped me get through social situations.
I mean, it's interesting that, you know, this idea that, you had things like, saying the chubby part of it, which I can empathize with, but I still haven't grown tall enough to kind of, level out the chubbiness in me.
My mom called it my second chance when I got taller, and she was right.
I bet. Because when I looked at your stuff, it's like not only are you a constant stand-up who can handle any room, you also are with Uncle Function, right? Am I correct with that? Doing sketch comedy, right? And then you've done acting, so you're kind of doing it all. And in Shelf Life, you just mentioned, and I still want to get back to, the journey in terms of what shows you may have watched, what teachers or mentors may have said, hey, you should take this class or stuff like that. But you said you're going to be doing a Carnival cruise coming up. Now, was that a bit?
Well, that was a joke. That was a bit. I lie a lot. I love Anthony Jeselnik, and I'll tell you, I have to figure out what to do as I go forward, because I have some bits that relate to my real life that are lies or they're crazy exaggerations. And I've been doing more and more interviews, like in this kind of setting where we have time to talk about it. But when it's like a 4-minute interview on some news station and they ask me a question, I hate being like, oh, that was a lie. Oh, well, that was a lie too. But I think that's my own fault for playing with a mix of true stories and then complete fabrications. But that's okay. What are you going to do?
Well, it's part of what we do. And I mean, I think I even was listening to something, I can't remember what it is to give it credit to, but that part of what we do is exaggeration is the better part of storytelling. And really, you're just trying to entertain people and get them to laugh. That's all we're trying to do, is trying to get them to laugh. Maybe think, if you want to use a little, sugar to make the medicine go down, but as long as you're not hurting anybody.
Sure.
But when I saw that, I was like, oh, cool. He's got a gig. He's going to be doing cruise ships, which I heard is good money, but you just got to watch your language. And, but I've known other people who've done cruise ships and, they were able to put away a lot of money. But that aside, so did you grow up in New York City?
No, I grew up in Potomac, Maryland. And I came up here a lot as a kid because my dad just loved New York, and he was one of these guys, he either had a lot of money or he was broke. And he loved coming up to New York and just splurging. So he would come to New York, we'd stay at the Plaza or the Four Seasons or the Waldorf. And I had this really skewed version of just New York being this awesome place where you always got to sit 7th row at Lion King. And I did a lot of summer camps up in New York, so I just was accustomed to New York to a certain degree, albeit a very skewed version. New York is different when it's on your parents' dime.
And that resonates. I remember my parents also, but we got to America in the summer of '69. But then in the early '70s, my father was a doctor, and he would moonlight and go along with an ambulance to make an extra $100 in a night. And then we'd come and stay at the Waldorf for the weekend and go skating in Rockefeller Plaza. So it's interesting, that similarity in that. And, growing up in Maryland, were there, comedic influences on television that you were watching? You said Anthony Jeselnik, but were there other stand-ups who you saw when you were younger and you're like, oh, yeah, this?
I was a Seinfeld guy. My dad and I, we would watch it every Thursday. I think it was Thursday. Mm-hmm. And so, that's just my intro to stand-up, was just those quick Seinfeld vignettes at the beginning. And I feel like Seinfeld really, it entered my DNA of, what comedy was. And I think it's stuck with me, even though I don't feel like I look to Seinfeld kind of as, the kind of comedy I'm trying to do. I find that it's there. It's just that's what I understood comedy to be. Would you just talk about a thing and you're like, what's the deal with this thing?
But I mean, to some degree, that's what it is. When people talk to me or ask me about it, I said, to me, it comes down to two things: what you say and how you say it. The what you say is your writing, your turn of phrase, your lingo, your language, and then how you say it is just finding your own kind of natural, equalizer a little bit up style. Were there friends you grew up with who you made laugh, and this was like your early audiences aside from your mom and dad and the disco party? Were there other folks who were as funny as you, or you could play off of, or teachers that recognized your sense of humor?
I don't think they recognized my comedy, but I had enough. My schools had like that one play a year, and I feel like all the drama teachers were very were very supportive of like giving me the lead in whatever play, whatever musical we would do. So I feel like they recognized it and they gave me that opportunity. That let me just realize like this was the right path to be on. I got to be Harold Hill in The Music Man in 8th grade, and I got to be a good part in Fiddler on the Roof in 7th grade. And I think I just had a good system. It wasn't until high school that there was like a real full-on theater program where I feel like I was embraced. I was like one of the only two freshmen in the play my freshman year, but it was 12th night. And that's where I had my first like director. Her name was Laura Rosberg, who like she could tell from the beginning that I just wanted to work. I just wanted to like do everything I could to be good at this craft. And she like took me in and embraced me and put me in every single theater piece in all 4 years that I was there.
And when you say work, like in terms of your work ethic, did you have a work ethic around other aspects of school, or did you find the work ethic was really when it came to the world of theater?
I was always a decent kid in school, but I didn't care. No, I didn't care enough. So like theater was the first time where I was just like going nuts with it. I'd practice songs for hours and hours and hours. So like clearly that's where it clicked. I went through all these phases where I begged my parents. I was like, could you please send me? I really, after I went to my first musical theater camp, I like begged my parents to send me to Interlochen, which I think it was called Interlochen, was one of the like sleepaway boarding arts schools. And I just loved it so much. I wanted to be with theater kids. I didn't feel very cool in high school. I didn't have a ton of friends at all. And I just felt like I knew what I wanted to do. And I don't blame my parents per se. I just think you don't know what to do when your kids like take me out of the school system. I'm ready to start doing this. And it's very hard. I don't know what it's like to have had me as a kid, because they don't understand how the world works. They don't understand like, people's understanding of children who start too early are like, the joke I made earlier about like Disney stars who just become addicted to drugs. So I kind of did fine in school. I got A minuses, B pluses, but I never gave it my all in the way that I feel like I give comedy my all now.
And so, you're in high school, you get to be in these productions, there's a teacher who sees, talent in you and is nurturing that. Does that eventually influence where you want to go to college? Because at that point, you can kind of maybe have a say in the choice of a college that is more theater-based.
Say that one more time?
Well, I'm just saying, because you knew, that you wanted to do this work and that college was coming up, did you choose a college or someplace after high school that was more geared towards the theater?
Yeah, so I was like definitive where I was like, I'm going to go to a conservatory. I auditioned for 8 conservatories, submitted for 2 non-conservatory colleges, but I was pretty dead set. And what happened, I was very unfortunate circumstance where my school in D.C. was called Georgetown Day School, and after the end of every play or musical, we would stay that night. It would usually be a Saturday, and we would stay that night to take down the set. And it would be, go till 5 a.m, and everyone would get drunk and smoke pot and eat pot brownies, and it was just like it was a tradition. But my sophomore year, someone pulled the fire alarm, and because of that, they did like a full investigation. And for the first time in this theater's history, they started like finding out who brought the alcohol, who brought the drugs, and in kind of a mass confession that gathered all the sophomores and freshmen. The upperclassmen got in more trouble, but they gathered all the sophomores and freshmen, and they put pressure on us until people started cracking, going, I took a bite of a pot brownie, I took a sip of the liquor, and looking back, I should have never come forward because they didn't have any proof. But I admitted that I had drunk. I lied. I didn't say I ate some of the pot brownie, but I said I drank. And because of that, I had to write every college I applied to a letter saying that I had gotten drunk on campus. And it was very tricky because most high schoolers were getting drunk in some way, shape, or form. B, the only reason it was on campus because it was this like weird tradition. But I think it gave the impression that, I was a fucking like crazy wild kid. So I think that had some play in the fact that I only got into 3 colleges. I got into 3 of the 10. One was North Carolina School of the Arts, which looking back, I probably should have gone there. It was a great acting conservatory. But when I visited, some kid who was like in class turned to me and mouthed, "Don't go here." And like something about that made me go, okay, I better not do that. I got in there. I got in Sarah Lawrence, where there was not a conservatory program. So I was like, that's dead for me. And then a place called University of Miami is where I went. It's in Florida. And they gave me a nice scholarship. When I visited the theater, the musical theater head of the department or whatever, told me, he was like, I want you to be the next leading man at this department. So he made a very hard sell to get me to go there. And I fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. And I have a real problem with BFA programs now. Now at the age of 32 and having gone through many of the trials and tribulations of this career, I think a 4-year program is too long. I think if you go to NYU or even if you go to Northwestern and you leave with like 150 friends in the industry and you kind of have a web, I'm like, okay, maybe it was worth it for that. But having gone to a college for 4 years where the tuition was $50-something thousand a year, thank God I had, $20,000 scholarship. And then I had 9 other people in my conservatory by the time I graduated, 2 of which are still in show business today. It's like you end up, wherever you move there with fucking nothing. They give you a showcase at the end of it in the hopes that you'll get some casting directors interested in you, but they don't get good casting, or they don't get huge casting directors. There are huge agencies and huge managers. They get, frankly, a lot of agents who just kind of sign, 1,000 people off college showcases that year, and then 2 of them actually get some success. So sorry, I ended up going the more bitter side of all of this. But yes, I did go to college because I was like, I want a system that helps me attain these theatrical dreams. And I found that I let myself be a victim of a system that seems like it's going to set you up for success and kind of just doesn't give you quite the tools that you need. And then should you move to New York or LA, really does not set things up well for you.
Georgetown Day, though, that is like, I mean, that's a pretty well-known, school, right? I mean, that's a really good school, right?
Georgetown Day School. Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah,
Obama.
Yeah. It's a well-known school.
Yeah. It's Obama's was going to choose to send his kids to either there or Sidwell Friends, and we were very excited. He chose Sidwell. But yes, it's a private high school. Very great teachers, fantastic theater department, and it used to be kind of known as like the druggy school. I think back in the 70s and 80s. Like I think all my principals when they were younger English teachers were smoking pot with the other kids. And by the time I got there, though, it had cleaned up most of its act.
I mean, I have a similar story in high school where my class got caught drinking on the senior class trip to Epcot. I wasn't there because I was interviewing at Emory and another university, but they took away our senior prom, and I'm like, when I look back on it, I'm like, it's just the thought of somebody, because it was somebody who made a decision to make you mail these letters to these other colleges, where it's like you're not doing anybody any favors, because then this young person's not going to get into the place of their choice, which means you're not going to be able to say, hey, we had another student get into this place. But that's my own kind of, vitriol around like these adults, these so-called adults making these decisions that really affect lives. Not to say, look, I mean, we all end up where we're going to end up, but where was the place was your number one choice that you wanted to go that you might have gone had they not got a letter that, said
and let me be clear, like I don't want to pretend like I'm delusional where like I would have gotten in anywhere that didn't have that letter. I just think like looking back, NYU for sure, only because you get this like vast network. And, I could have started taking improv or sketch classes along the way and maybe found my comedy, my comedy goals sooner. But I think at the time it was like I was so into musical theater. And I think like Juilliard was obviously just one of those things where you're like, oh, if you go to Juilliard, you're set. And I did the audition. I mean, these auditions are terrible. Like they have to take all these applicants in and create a system that's fair for these kids who some of them travel across the country and they go to Juilliard and they get to do 2 1-minute monologues. And I went up and in the middle of my Hamlet monologue, the fire alarm went off. And I was not of cool enough mind to like be fun with it. Like I would know now if I was in an audition room and the fire alarm went off, and it was one of these like test alarms where we didn't have to leave the building. Like I would know how to be funny about it, crack a joke, dance to the alarm. I don't know, but at the time I just stood there in front of the people judging me, just frozen in fear, like, oh my God, my dreams are getting crashed, are being destroyed. So yeah, it's very hard to prepare kids for that kind of thing. I think it was so difficult, man. You're just going to colleges. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. You have a college advisor who doesn't know like enough about the arts to really give you really good advice about what to do. There's 2 other kids in my 100-person grade private school who are actually pursuing this seriously. So I went to these colleges and I did one. Cincinnati Conservatory of Music was a huge one that I wanted to get into. It's just known as like stars of musical theater came from that program. And I showed up and the head of the program, he went by Bubba, big guy, growly voice. And he came out, he was like, why, you're an hour late to your appointment. And I showed him my sheet that said that he had the wrong time somehow. But he was like, oh, fine, get in here. And it's like, Jesus, I flew to Cincinnati with my stepfather who got a hotel room for me to sing 16 bars of a song for this motherfucker who has now started off the entire thing with like it was just wild. It was just such a wild experience, and I guess your first taste of like the brutalness of show business.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just as you're saying this stuff, I'm just thinking about these people along the way who got their own stuff going on, but just don't realize how they're disrupting other people's lives in a way that's unnecessary. Like Bubba. But so you show up in Miami, Florida. I think my friend Asif Manvi, he's also an alumnus of University of Miami. Is that correct?
Oh, I don't think I knew that if he was.
I mean, I'm doing this on my phone, so I can't look it up. But I believe he's also an alumnus of the University of Miami, because then I think he stayed to do Disney down there. But I'd have to look that up to be sure. So what was the experience like there at Miami? Was it like, Florida's probably pretty nice, University of Miami,
I mean, looking back, I wish I had taken advantage a little bit more of being in Miami, but that's also not who I am. I mean, only now do I feel like I push myself to like go out and do a thing with friends. But I went to one football game. I got very obsessive. I think I was kind of a lazier kid growing up, and as I said, I was like passionate about theater. But I think I made a pact in my head where I was like, when I get to college, I will work so fucking hard that there will be no choice but for me to succeed. And I think I should have been in therapy, and I think I just went to college and I was like, for me at the time, part of it was like, I'm going to be the best singer. Like, I'm just going to be astounding. So I would spend hours and hours every day practicing in a vocal booth, these torturously small, spoiling hot rooms, just doing scales. And I think I wasted a good deal of like my college years not going out, not partying too much, because I was just like, I need to take advantage of this time, and I need to leave college indestructible. So I was fortunate. I had a girlfriend in college who I dated for like 3 of the 4 years, who was a very good actor, and like I got that part of college where like I was in a meaningful, deep relationship, and I learned a great deal from ruining it. But no, I didn't take it. My sister's at the University of Miami now, and she's in a sorority, and she's not a theater person. And I see these pictures of her, and it's like Snoop Dogg handing her a joint at some club she went to pre-coronavirus, or just going to concerts, and I'm like, oh wow, that's living life.
And how did she end up going to Miami as well? She just knew you'd been there, or?
Yeah, I really don't think she made her decision at all based off me. I don't think she views me as someone like, oh, let me copy that guy's life. I think she just maybe knew about it because of me. But it's a pretty popular party school, and she's a Miami person. I don't know what I was thinking when I visited there. You're so young and you're visiting these colleges. And again, that one head of the musical theater department like kind of courted me, and he got like one of the juniors to like take me to a cool bar, and it feels like it's warm and it's beautiful, and that's undeniable about University of Miami. It's just like such a beautiful campus that it's really hard to go there and not be like, yeah, let's do this. But yeah, I was just a lame homebody kid.
Now you mentioned this. So I'm only bringing it up because you said you felt like you ruined the relationship in college. Why do you think you did? What was it that you think you ruined it? The college relationship.
My relationship to college?
No. You said you were dating somebody in college for 3 years.
Oh,
and
yes,
you mentioned that before you ruined it. I'm just curious because you brought that up, and is it something you did? Was it acting out? Was it that you were leaving?
It was No, I'm fine. I wrote a whole play about it. I mean, it was like a matter of because of my divorce past or just who I am, I love this person, but I wasn't someone who's going to get married young. I think I wanted to explore and live life. And so what happened after college, we moved. We were in this acting company in Philly with this teacher called Wendy Ward, and she was I should probably not say the full name. I don't care though. It was a Meisner-based acting company, and she was like this incredible acting teacher. I did one summer program with her, and she was just like, something about her was unlike college, which was very regimented and like acting taught, very into text analysis work, which I think is of course very useful, but I also think it's over relied on in some college programs because like all the teachers can kind of be on the same page with like, all right, everyone, you just have to figure out your objective. And this Meisner teacher was like, it felt like art again, if you know what I mean. Like there was cool exercises and it felt like we were actually talking about emotions. Whereas my college, I think a lot of acting teachers, like in retaliation against shitty Lee Strasberg teachers, were like, enough of this emotion bullshit. Let's talk about the text. And this teacher was like, this Wendy Ward, this Meisner teacher was like a return to art and feeling. And I just like fell in love with her. And so after graduating, my musical theater love had been kind of beaten out of me. I really hit a wall. It was gradual, but after 4 years of like working harder than anyone I knew to be a better singer and finding my abilities not increase that much, I think I just gradually turned my back on it. I lost the enthusiasm for it. And I joined this acting company. My girlfriend she was an incredible actor. She and I moved to Philly, and there were all these Australians that moved there for this acting company. This acting teacher happened to teach in Philly and Australia. And we did the thing of working for free to put together a show in a church, intensive labor, everyone's losing money. And for a while, it felt really wonderful. I felt like I was improving as an actor. And then money started going away. We did the shows and no one showed up. None of us were press savvy or knew how to sell tickets. So we would get ready for this elaborate show and no one would show up. And we were in costumes and sets and it was humiliating. And this acting company was supposed to go to Australia to tour Australia with this show. And I think it all fell apart. The money fell through. The teachers started like fighting with some of the Australians. And if I watch any cult documentary, like it follows the same trajectory of like some people wise up, some people are loyal soldiers, and all the while this teacher, as everything collapses, kind of her temper just increases and it becomes borderline abusive. So it was just like my life. I was supposed to go to Australia with this girlfriend. The plan was after Australia we would probably part ways, but I hadn't really thought that far ahead in my life. I just wanted to be a great actor and be part of an acting company. And instead, Australia was canceled before I knew it. Our plan of breaking up had been like zoomed forward, and she was going to move to LA and I was going to move to New York. That was always the plan. And it just happened like so quickly that I think we would have probably broken up anyway in a different way, shape, or form. But at the time she moved to LA, we stayed in touch for a very long time. I had planned to do a play in the Fringe Festival about our relationship that she would be in. It was like a romantic comedy I was writing. I didn't get into the Fringe Festival. I was devastated. And in the time, the year between that Fringe Festival and the one that I actually did get into, she met someone, fell in love, and they got married, and she had a kid. And it was like, for me, it was the most devastating event of my life. Very, very deserved, and very much like not something I was actively, I didn't want to get married or anything like that. But at that moment, it just was like my artistic partner, my best friend, someone who in my mind was like the love of my life had truly moved on. And it was a shock, man. It was crazy. And I ended up writing a play about, it was kind of a meta play about the play that never happened, which was like what I had hoped was going to happen. And what did I want? Did I want her to do this play and we fall back in love and get married? Or did I just want to keep her on a thread? This is when I'm 23, and I swear it took 4 or 5 years in therapy to like really contextualize it. And only in the last 2 years did we start speaking again. And do I feel like moved on? I mean, fuck, man. It was intense. It was brutal.
Wow. Yeah, wow. I mean, there's, certain questions I have, some of them are just like the logistics of how, I guess you found Philadelphia because of this teacher, so the two of you decided to move there because of this teacher that happened to be in Philadelphia.
Yeah. It was just like, I'm very envious of like, I think I approached the industry in a very like, I'm going to go to New York, I meet the casting directors, I get the agent, and that acting company was a brief moment of like a more organic thing. And oftentimes we hear about the organic groups and companies that thrived and, somehow became mainstream, and soon they had a show together. But this was like, it was this small bubble in my life of like what I think was really pure art, really pure acting, really sincere. I was not thinking about the industry. And I wish I had invested that kind of youthful naivete and the willingness to be like, yeah, I'll do tech for this show I'm not in and not getting paid for, on something that had more longevity. I ended up kind of doing the Flea Theater when I moved to New York, and they got in a lot of flack recently over this whole quarantine about some of their practices, where they have people in rehearsals all day for a play they're not getting paid for, and they're running tech, and they're painting the sets. And when I got to New York, I was already past that phase of my life where I was like, oh, I did that. I'm not going to run front of house for free anymore. And it would have been nicer if I had done it at a place like the Flea Theater, where I met peers who would become my friends and my colleagues for the rest of my life. That's part of it. Like the greatest lesson I think I could pass on to like my younger self is, it's just like, especially when you're young, find communities and invest time in communities. I'm very envious of stand-up comics who like start in a local scene, because they really like forge a community, and that community lasts them to those who move to New York every time they go back home, and then ultimately when they're all working on TV shows, if they're so lucky.
So the leap from Philly to New York, how does that happen? Did you end up going, Philly's done and I'm moving to New York? Because, moving to, I used to have this really good doctor, general practitioner, and, I'd go to him once a year, but we'd, talk and have conversations. And I think one time we talked about how people forget that just getting to New York City at any time in history, you would have had to have been of the hardiest of stock and strong, and you put money away, but we kind of take it for granted now. But just getting to New York and living in New York is its own challenge. So granted, Philly's not that far away, but what was the impetus to go, I'm leaving Philly, aside from the relationship, to now I'm moving to New York by yourself?
I always wanted to move to New York. It always was like the dream from visiting it with my dad as a kid. So there was no other option. I was kind of, I mean, this is one of my flaws. I was just kind of tunnel vision in that way, where there was no way I wasn't going to give it a shot here. I wanted to be on Broadway at the time.
And so you move here by yourself, though?
Yeah. Let me think. When I first moved here, I went backpacking around Europe for a little after I first moved here. But yes, pretty much. I subletted around. That terrible first period in New York where you're just subletting is brutal. And I moved into. I left it like 3 months ago, but I was there for so long. I moved into a 3-bedroom apartment with one of my old college conservatory roommates and another kid who was getting a BA at University of Miami. So yeah, I mean, I had a couple friends, but I felt very alone. I was very fortunate in that, like, my parents were helping me out financially, and it's a huge key to my ability to just like make it through that beginning period. But I basically poured my money into the casting director workshops and the agent meeting workshops and the the stuff that I know, like in LA, a lot of this stuff is not allowed. And I think there's a lot of problems with it, but that's how I started getting my agents, my commercial agent, my manager until recently, my legit agent, all that jazz. And that was my approach. I was just like, let's attack the industry head on. I have the financial resources to kind of play this game. And that's what I did. And I got enough, like, I was getting a lot of commercial work for a little bit. I, got a line on CBS's Blue Bloods. So it felt like it wasn't all for naught. I did the Fringe Festival. The kind of real highlight was I was a spokesman for General Electric for like a year and a half. And that felt like I had made it. I was telling someone the other day, I basically did 6 national commercials for General Electric and then a lot of corporate events. And these corporate events, like, there's this feeling of, oh, I guess I've arrived at the next league of my career. I'm getting flown to Las Vegas in first class. I'm making money. My parents are no longer helping me at all, and I'm doing great. And then it just fucking stops. And all of a sudden, like the classic actor tale that you think you're going to avoid by being smart, but the classic actor tale of like 8 months go by and you haven't had an audition and you're like, what the fuck is going on? What the fuck is going on? And it was in that time period that I was very fortunate to, I think after being lonely for so long, I joined Uncle Function, the sketch team that performed at the Pit for a very, very long time. And like they became a huge hub of community for me. They were my friends, and kind of the sketch team was half a sketch team and half like a reason to get. There's one woman in the group too, but I find especially with men, like it can be very difficult to like for men to like figure out how to make time for their friendships. And the sketch team was also like a way that we all had to see each other frequently to plan this thing, and we grew very close. And that was part of, I think, a more positive turn my approach took, where I was like, oh, I'm going to lean into this because I want friends, and they can be colleagues too, but like you can't just continue to exist in this business kind of alone. You go crazy.
But like Uncle Function, how did it come about? Like the genesis of it, you meeting them, was it in classes? Was it just around the scene? When did open mics start happening? What year was this, and what theaters were you going to see shows and stuff?
I'll be honest. I didn't see a lot of shows in general. It's not an enviable trait. But I think I get really jealous of seeing stuff. So I saw some Broadway stuff here and there. I saw a stand-up show here and there. But I kind of was I was equally as obsessive as I was with the voice stuff. Where like at the time I was like, I'm an actor now, and I'm going to take acting classes, and if I'm not doing that, then I'm going to take a workshop with yet another voiceover casting director. So again, this is my own flaws of where like I took one improv class at the Magnet, and then I stopped. And it wasn't until like so I'm doing this smorgasbord of stuff, TV that was like in for a little bit, then it stopped completely. I have the sketch team as a consistent, and the thing that led to stand-up, which I feel like is the real chapter of my life that I'm in now, was this play I did at the Fringe Festival, and it was a two-hander, and it was going to be with the woman who, my ex-girlfriend, and I did the show. It did well at the Fringe Festival. It got into Fringe Encores, which I think I did the Fringe past its like real prime, because Fringe Encores, it used to seem like it meant something, but by the time I did it, it really was just like you get 5 more show dates and you got to figure out a way to fill it up. It was pretty brutal. But someone saw it at Fringe Encores and decided they wanted to produce an off-Broadway run. And so I had this like long 3-year process of them getting a director and a general manager, and it led to a month-long run at 59 East 59 theaters. And in that show, I did a lot of like storytelling and jokes. And I had a producer friend named Lindsay Elizabeth Hand, who's produced a lot of my sketches. And she said she saw me at a, what do you call it when you perform it for producers for money? What's the term? Backers audition.
Uh-huh.
A backers audition. And she saw it, and she took me out to lunch, and she like very emotionally was like, you should be doing this. As in like joking and storytelling and monologuing and all that stuff. And I had done I'd done one stand-up comedy class in college. I was in New York for the summer doing an acting program, and I took a class at Caroline's Comedy Club with Linda Smith. And I had loved it, and I had gone back to college and performed a full hour for my friends. Like when you first start stand-up, you just start writing and writing and writing. You have all these ideas you've been dying to say, and now you know how to say them. And it was like a very dirty, sex-heavy hour of comedy. So I was one of those obnoxious actors who's like, oh, I'm an actor / stand-up comedian, by which I meant like every 6 months I did a bringer show at Caroline's where it was sold out and the audience was super generous, and I would crush with all new material. So I thought like, wow, I guess I'm really good at this. So I always had thought about stand-up comedy, but it was like, it's a whole different lifestyle than I was used to. It was nights. I was more of a homebody. I like to stay up late, but I didn't like being out late. And I think in my years in New York, what I would do is I would do these bringer shows where the audience like could not be more generous and more giving. And then I would do an open mic at the Creek in the Cave or even the Pit, and like, you know, the audience is now comedians, and comedians don't respect, you know, just charisma at a mic. You need to have good, solid jokes. So I would kill at these shows where it was sold out, bomb at these mics, and in my head, I think a lot of people fall into this ego where I was like, oh, I'm only good when it's like sold out. And it's that delusion that prevented me from really pursuing it and continuing to tell people I was a stand-up comedian. But it wasn't until my friend told me you should pursue this full time that I had a real like coming to Jesus moment where I was like, if you're going to be a stand-up comedian, You're 27. You need to do it. You need to do it. And you have to go out every night. And I started being that guy. I started being the person who goes to mics and goes to shows and tries to get past the places. And I found the feedback system you get from stand-up and the kind of feeling of progress you're able to feel was very visceral. And I found after a year that I was just in it 100%.
Wow. And so from the math, from my deductive reasoning, that was 27, roughly right now you're 32?
I'm 32.
32. And so for 5 years, you've been kind of hitting it like a stand-up.
Yeah, I'd say, I guess it's coming on 5 years. And every stand-up always I've heard so many different, I have so many different answers, like when did I first start? But I think 5 years is a fair assessment. And in the last 3 years, I mean, up until COVID, I was doing it every night. I got into a club called LOL maybe 2 years ago, and it's it's a tough club. It's audiences that are barked in right off Times Square, and not ideal always for smart jokes. But I ended up getting this rare opportunity that not many comedians are afforded in New York of getting to perform. When I first started doing check spots there, I would perform 4 times a night, 5 times on weekends, and that's all I did. So I was doing up to 30 spots a week. In the holidays, there was a time where they had shows going on in 3 rooms, and I would do 8 shows that day. And that was the turning point where I felt like I got the kind of time in, I got to catch up to a skill level comparable to people my age, of people who have been doing it since they were 20. And I love it. I really, that's why this year has been very hard, especially the beginning of coronavirus. But I realized that I need constant feedback. I get off on it. That's how I like to write. If I wasn't doing stand-up and I was writing some other form, I always struggled with wanting someone to read it and tell me what's working and what's not working. Because that's how I like to throw shit at the wall and get an immediate. I don't know how people write novels. You know what I mean? That's so antithetical to my feedback loop system. Maybe I'll cool off when I get older. But once I got into stand-up, I think part of being in this career is you wait to see what's the thing that you do where people after the show go, holy shit, that was amazing. Or wow, you killed it up there. And hands down, after years of singing, after even, dancing or acting, stand-up was a thing where it was I felt, oh, I could be excellent at this. I could have never been an excellent singer. And it took me a long, long, long time to realize that. And for all I know, I'll look back and go I had a long stand-up too. But at least in this moment, I feel filled with oh, I can create something in this medium that's great.
And when you were doing that many sets, and that's kind of when the crucible at LOL for you, you're going from room to room, you're doing the same set. Because I know one thing in the world of improv that makes it challenging for improvisers to do stand-up is they're doing the same thing over and over again, or actors, but you're going from room to room, doing your act, basically, doing the same thing you did 15 minutes ago in one room, in another room. Or is it all new material? I mean, it can't be all new material, but
yeah. It's a real mix. I always try to lean towards more new. I think this is every stand-up's path, where after 2 years I realized, oh, I like to do a lot of new stuff, but I need to crush a little more often in order to continually get booked. And also the fact that if you run the same thing a lot, you find slight changes to the timing, slight changes in intonation, a 2-word difference that makes it pop harder. And I learned after a little that I need to repeat material somewhat more, but I've always been a little bit all over the place. I'm very resistant to like coming up with a strict set list. And honestly, filming the special, it's one of these few times where I really had to fight my impulse and be like, sit down, see what the order is. But I do like to just write a bunch of new shit, test it all out, and I have to fight myself to fine tune that final degree. And when you're in comedy, you see people that go too far that way. People who have done the same 5-minute set for 5 years, and it always crushes, and maybe they do every festival or they win every competition with it, but people start recognizing them as like, oh, they only have this. And then they try to write new stuff, and their ability to write new is just so weak that it bombs, and then they go back to their old shit, and then they don't evolve enough. So it's like comedy, it's kind of cool too, but it's like you have to figure out how much you're pushing yourself and when do you need to do well. And this year that's been compounded so much by the fact that I'm doing, a fifth, if not a tenth of the shows I would have been doing at this time. Maybe not even spots, but like I was going to be headlining and doing hours occasionally. And now I'm like, I'll have 10 minutes on an outdoor show or 8 minutes on a Zoom show. And I'm like, fuck, I barely have any time to work new stuff. How do I want to do this? Is there anywhere else I can test this? Can I call my sisters? Can I call a friend and run this joke by them to try to fine tune it a little before I bring it to the show? It's a constant struggle. And there's famous comedians who they release a Netflix special that's garbage. And I totally get how that could occur. They're famous. Netflix says we'll give you $1 million for it now. And they're like, oh, I don't really have an hour, but I took a weird shit this morning. I guess I can turn that into 15 minutes of material. And before you know it, they've released an hour that's like really disappointing. So it's kind of a cool, frustrating thing about stand-up, but I feel like I feel like it's a constant battle. You can get bad at stand-up at any time. Dave Chappelle could get bad at stand-up. Seinfeld could get bad at stand-up. John Mulaney could get bad at stand-up. Anyone who stays good at stand-up for decades has had to stay on top of themselves. And I think it's a cool art form in that sense. That someone who's 1 year in could do a set that crushes as hard as following Chris Rock doing a set. Like, if you write good material and you fine tune it, you can make it happen. You can feel the magic. Whereas like in acting, it's real tough. I'm not going to get to experience the same thing Meryl Streep gets to experience or Daniel Day-Lewis gets to experience. But I've done shows that Jerry Seinfeld was on. We both experienced the same thing that night. We got to go up, tell jokes. If they worked, the audience couldn't help but react with noise. And that's very cool. That feels very fun. And even when you're on the lower rungs of this career, and there's many frustrating elements, but you get moments that you feel like, I'm doing it just like everyone else is doing it.
Let me ask you 2 questions off that. I watched a lot of your storytelling and stand-up. When you're telling a story, have you written it down? Is it scripted, or I'm telling this story and I'm just going to go and I trust that I'm going to find the various, checkpoints along the way?
I am a big writer. I think it comes from my script writing background, that I like to write it all out. I don't memorize it like I repeat it and look. It's just kind of I naturally memorize it after I write it out. So I like to write it all out, and then I love listening. One of my favorite things and tedious things is I listen back to 90% of my sets, and then I go back to the page, and I love to edit. I mean, that's the best part of it, is editing based off what made people laugh. So that's me. I know a lot of people who don't write it out that much, and my system's always evolving, and I think I was getting in a place where I was headlining more, and like sometimes I had the room and the space to like really talk out new bits without having to write it out in advance. But that's a real luxury. Most times I'm working rooms where if I lose I could lose their focus in 10 seconds. And so I have to be more precise. You were talking about Asif Manvi. I remember he was doing a show at the Pit. I forget what he was calling it, but it was very much a like working shit out show. And it's a real blessing that he's at a place in his career that 30 people are willing to show up on a Sunday night, and he can explore a story that's not fully cooked, and they'll stay on board with him. And if something works after 3 minutes of no jokes, they're still on board enough that they laugh. He hears it. He knows, okay, that's the moment I keep for next time. But you really don't always have that luxury for a long time. He's a very successful comedian. I could only be so lucky to have that. So yes, to answer your question in full, I do write out for the most part.
Now, shelf life, you said you had struggle, nailing down a running order. But I mean, that obviously is material you had tried. It was scripted. You had a set list for that. How did shelf life come about that, in the midst of this pandemic, you figured out how to set up and record a show and it's out on Amazon?
Yeah. So when coronavirus first started, there was this feeling with once the Zoom shows began where it was like some shows would go as far as say they'd be like, please don't talk about coronavirus, because everyone would go on stage, on Zoom and be like, finally a show I don't have to wear pants to, and 5 comedians in a row would do that. But it also felt like insane to not write material addressing what was going on. So I just ended up writing. I was scared. I was fucking terrified. I had put all my eggs into this stand-up comedy basket, and some people were saying like, stand-up comedy won't be back till 2022. I was just so scared, and my response, rather than start a podcast, write a screenplay, I was like, I'm gonna get through this. I'm just gonna write more. I'm gonna write more stand-up. I'm gonna get sharp. I'm gonna get better, and I'm gonna see through this. So I ended up writing all this new material, and topical in a way that I don't think I had written a lot of prior. I think I just didn't want to write topical because you want jokes that last forever. But I was like, let's write topical. Let's try to write something about coronavirus. Let's write something political. And I had all these jokes that had a limited shelf life. And there was a woman, I recorded an audiobook for her. She was a news producer. And she reached out and she was like, I'd love to produce a special. I'll pay for it. And I think in my mind, I wanted to get a Tonight Show set, or get a late night spot, or have one of these comedy labels like 800 Pound Gorilla, be like, hey, do you want to record an hour, 4-hour label? I wanted to be asked. I wanted to get the Comedy Central half hour. And I didn't know if that was a year away, 3 years away. It definitely felt like within 3 years grasp. And then coronavirus happens. Everything's going to get backed up. I have no fucking idea what's going to happen. I look at the comedians who are more self-starters, who release all their specials themselves, and I go like, I'm 32. I have these jokes that are now going to expire. Stop being precious. I would love to be the dude that my first album, Anthony Jeselnik's first album is like, it's this brilliant, perfect album. But that was his fortune. And he recorded it at like a sold out, packed UCB theater. I'm in the middle of coronavirus. I don't know when stand-up comedy is ever coming back. I have this brief window where outdoor shows are happening. Someone's offering to pay for it. Most of these jokes I'm never going to be able to use past a certain point. Let's just fucking do it. And I knew I would feel better about this year if we went that route. If I did something and I said, hey, this year was a nightmare, but look, I released a special. And once it was set, I had to focus. I think a lot of us, especially creatives, it's been very hard to focus and have goals during all this, because you don't have any deadlines, you don't have anything really to look forward to. And this gave me guidance to go, all right, I have all these random coronavirus jokes. I have to come up with a half hour. Not only that, I will never get to run this full half hour at any of the outdoor shows I'm doing, because I'm getting 8 to 10 minute spots. So I have to be really smart in how I break up, how I work on these chunks. And I'm just very fortunate that I had opportunities like Stand Up New York. Stand Up New York is a club here that did a lot of outdoor shows early on, and I took advantage of that, and Zoom shows. And I feel proud of somehow being able to come up with a half hour that, for the most part, doesn't have too many weak points. And looking back at it, it's like, you know what? Some people get the fortune in their careers where they get to release maybe more perfect things or more ideal circumstances, or their first whatever is released by a label. But that's not what my career took. And right now I have to try to stay busy on my own in a way that if no industry things came through, no auditions came through, that I could still be like, hey, I fucking did stuff. And it took a fucking global pandemic to kind of shift to that point of view.
Let me ask you a few questions off of, what you just said. The woman, how did you end up doing an audio book for her? Because that seems like the first connection to this person. How did you guys meet to do this audiobook? Was it through some audio book reading service, or was it she knew you?
It was pretty crazy. Her name's Jacqueline Thrapp, and she just found me on social media. Because part of I'd always done Twitter and whatnot, but part of coronavirus was like, all right, well, let's figure out TikTok. Let's figure out how to make the Instagram stories better. Let's figure out Twitter. So she found me, I think, on Instagram, and she just saw enough of the clips I was posting of stand-up shows before the world collapsed, and she just reached out, and I was like, oh, usually someone would have me audition for this, because it was paid on top of it. And she just hired me, and worked well enough. She took me out to a drink to pitch the stand-up thing. And my other producer friend, who I mentioned before, is Lindsay Elizabeth Hand, who told me to do stand-up in the first place. I said, would you be willing to be on board with this too? Because I want to have a producer that I know. And she did, very graciously. I think everyone was working for less than their professional rate. I think every element of this special, as many of my projects are, they're calling in favors. Ended up assembling a team that I trusted enough to put something out that I wouldn't be embarrassed about. Because I think that's one of the things with stand-up, where we also have a community of comedians that we want to respect us. And you want success, you want some degree of fame or power in the industry or creative things. But I think stand-ups, there's always a part of us that wants to be respected by our peers. And it can be scary when you release a special with people not in the stand-up industry, because you're like, what if this sucks? What if some of these jokes are hacky? What if the final product looks like shit and my peers look down on me? And I think that's just a fear. I think stand-ups just want to be admired by their peers, because I admire my peers for being smart and talented and hilarious. And I was nervous to release even the trailer. I'm like, will anyone share it? Will any of the comedians who I really respect write, hey, that was a good joke? And I got some great feedback from some people that I really look up to, and I'm really very happy about how it all came to be.
So, I mean, one of the things I talk about to people is that, like, there are moments in our life where they're just moments of grace. It's just luck. You've worked, you had preparation, but this person contacting you through Instagram to do this kind of, I mean, I know, I don't know for yourself, to me, it is a big deal. You put out a half hour on Amazon, and it's good. And, but this woman is having you record a book just for her, or she's part of a company. That little moment to me is amazing, that someone wants to book them. Personally?
It was a personal project. I think she
wrote a book.
She wrote, I think it was more like an audio play of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not I think, I did it. So like it was more like an audio play that I think Audible has been getting into recently, and Audible, received it for her, has released it for her. I think she's someone who works in the news, and she has like creative impulses. I think there was either something changed in her life because of coronavirus, where she had the ability to kind of fund some projects. And it was just like, I was nervous because you know how it is. I'm at a point where I have enough followers that like some people want to like do something with me, and you have to decide, like, is this someone I really want to work with? Is it worth the time? Is this just taking away from me focusing on something I need to do, like writing a pilot? But she was someone who, aside from the finances, which again, this isn't like, it's not a super expensive thing, but it's like, it's more about someone who has like a drive to get it done. And I needed that. I needed that extra person being like, let's film this. This is cool. This is a moment in history. Let's get it on tape. I have a documentary friend. They'll add a documentary in front of it to pull me out of the muck of like, well, no one's going to watch this. No one needs more stand-up. It's not going to be my best work. So you're very lucky to ever find those people in your life. Especially with comedians. There's a lot of comedians. We all have our own, we have selfish desires, and it can be very tough to find like someone who's a producer and they want to bring your vision to life. Sure, there comes a time when like industry is involved or people think they can make money off you, but before people can make money off you, it's rare to find someone who really is like, thinks you're talented and wants to help you put together a comedy special. And I think I've learned enough, and I've seen enough comedians who worked outside the system and made their own shit that it didn't take too much to persuade me, like, yeah, just fucking do it. This person's going to get a nice camera and make sure the sound works and make sure the event happens and that the editor is willing to listen to notes. And I can't wait I don't even know when the Tonight Show is ever going to be back with audience members. So just do it. And it's something I don't think I would have done 4 years ago or 5 years ago. It took a lot of toil and us to figure it out.
And then how do you guys get to Amazon? How does that happen? Because I mean, part of this thing, for this thing that I'm doing, which I've, done a number of, and for me too, this has grown out of COVID. But it's also my own interest in helping demystify it for other people listening, to kind of see people's journey. So for someone listening to this, to them, the big thing is going to be, you got to Amazon. How did you get it on Amazon?
So it's actually, you're able to submit to Amazon for approval, and they approved it.
Okay.
So it's not like it's not the craziest system in the world to get on there, but it's we just created whatever file that was high enough quality, and they watch it, and I don't know what they turned down, but they approved it, and now I'm maybe talking to a label about releasing it as an album, and it's cool. I feel glad. I'm like, there's one joke that comedians keep coming up, and they're like, oh, that one joke, and it's the same joke, and it's like, cool, this feels nice. I wrote something, I worked really hard to fine tune it, and now it's out there for anyone to see, and some of my peers checked it out, and like, other than money, what more could I ask for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. So, if right now you could wave a magic wand for yourself, what is it that you want for yourself in the next chapter of your career? You'd mentioned, writing a pilot. You'd mentioned, a world of stand-up, which we don't know when we're going to return. I think they're doing it in other states, but I don't know when they'll do it in New York the way they once did it.
Yeah, I can tell you, because I've done it. The Connecticut was doing them, but then they just reduced their indoor capacity, so shows are started getting canceled there. New York was doing these outdoors and rooftops, and Jersey started doing shows, but you know how it is. You look at the news, it's like sometimes it feels like more things are opening up, but the numbers are going up, and you're like, these things are going to crash eventually. And if France is closing back down, who's to say we're not next? So I don't know, man. It is very fucking scary. There's a part of me that is like, maybe a lot of clubs will close and comedy will become more decentralized, and maybe that's good, because you know how it is where stand up in New York, let's say there's 12 major clubs, that's 12 bookers, and like, God forbid you get off the wrong foot with 5 of them, or they just like don't dig your style for whatever reason, or they're all a certain demographic, or they're all into a certain kind of comedy. Now you're like, you've lost a lot of work opportunities. But if you have less clubs and like a shitload of independent shows, I think you have more an opportunity to find your niche, to just explore. So it's very scary. There's a hope that I have that some people quit, in the sense of people that would have quit eventually anyway, that they're quitting now. Because I do see the comics that are still either doing the Zoom shows or the outdoor shows. A lot of them are people who are like, they love comedy, clearly. You could call them addicted to it if you were feeling cynical, or you could call them just like they love the art form. And I hope maybe there's a thinning of the herd in terms of those that stick around. It lets them continue to work in New York on a regular basis, even if there are less opportunities coming back from COVID. But I think that's optimistic. I think stand-up is also like very popular, and it's something people seem to want to explore at all different phases of their life, leading to this thing where there's too many, and there's too many comics, there's too many people who run a club and kind of just have their favorites and block off everyone else, or clubs that rely on bringer shows and lower the quality of all shows everywhere. It's a very it's a very rough ecosystem that already had so many problems to begin with. And losing these clubs is only going to make those problems worse. And I hope maybe it will. I'm hoping it leads to just a more creative landscape of where people do shows, how they do shows. And that's what I'm trying to stay hopeful for. Yes, I'm sure I'll have to take gigs that I wouldn't have the way my career felt like it was going. Like, hosting in Connecticut where I get paid $50, but it took me $100 to get there and back. And I'm losing money and I'm getting 10 minutes up top. But, if I have to do it to get back on track, I will, because what other choice do I have? I got to figure this out. I love this art form.
And so, for yourself, like someone like a Jerry Seinfeld took the art form and turned it into a sitcom. Someone like Woody Allen took the art form and turned it into writing and directing and acting in his own projects. What for yourself, and some people like George Carlin just did the art form, and we're in little movie roles here and there that he was doing for folks. So for yourself, if you could, COVID aside, coming out of COVID, things lessening up, what would be your dream situation for the next chapter? Because, you're young, you're 32, what do you want to see yourself,
I appreciate you saying I'm young. I really do feel like 32. I'm like, oh boy, I see the gray hairs in my sideburns, and I go, how long can I keep fooling them? It's tough, man. There's a part of me that's like, I think it would be very cool to have an acting career on the side of comedy or sketch. I do love sketch, but what I crave right now is I'm just like, let me go on stage for an hour. Let me go on stage for 90 minutes. So my focus is, I'm like, fuck, I want to get to a place. I would love to get some TV stand-up spots, but partially so that I could then go places on the weekends and do an hour minimum. Not minimum, 45 minutes, and do 6 headlining gigs over a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and just like work new material, work through all these half-baked ideas I've been working on the last fucking 9 months. And I think I feel very content of like, I just want to write really good stand-up, release it in some capacity. I now have so many avenues, TikTok. Now that I've released a special, it's kind of like I've broken the seal. I'm like, okay, I could put together an hour. I could put together an hour for an album. I could put together a clean hour for an album so it gets played on Sirius XM more, and that money could finance the tour. Like, these all, once the world hopefully returns to some semblance of normal post-vaccine, I feel like I have a lot of tools, and it's just, the world is my oyster in the sense of how I want to build my comedy career. And I want to take more autonomy. I hope I get a great manager who sets me up with some great fucking gigs. And I do think that will happen at some stage of my life. But I do feel like I am done waiting for these things. Not that I was a full-on waiter or, just waiting at home for someone to make it all happen. But I really feel like, no, I need to proceed as if none of that will ever happen and build it for myself. And I think I want to look at myself at the end of each day and feel like I'm a good stand-up comic. If someone comes to see me, they're going to see high-quality work. And compared to all the geniuses out there, many of which are much smarter than me, that I'm still producing stand-up comedy work that is worth the space it takes up and the space it occupies. And so if you do give me 30 minutes of your time, you'll walk away feeling like, oh, fuck, that was a good use of, for however cheap my tickets will sell for $5.
In an inside baseball kind of question, when you're talking about a half hour or 45 minutes and a running order and a set list, are you writing it down somewhere so you can see it, or it's just in your mind, I start out talking about this, that leads me to this, then I remember this goes here. How in your mind, and again, for the folks who you may pass this along to, who, are not stand-ups or who've always wanted to do stand-up.
Say that one more time. Let me get the full.
So the question is basically, like, when you're doing a half hour or 45 minutes or an hour, how do you keep track of your set as you're doing it? Do you I know Janine writes it down so she knows, here's my different bits that I'm doing tonight, and she can look at it on a stool.
I love bringing up. These days I'll put it on a napkin. As if that hides it at all. I often find I'll bring up a set list and never look at it. I'm very chaotic where most times I go on stage, if I'm doing an hour, when I was working on the special, the 30-minute special, I had typed out exactly what I was doing and I'd memorized it fairly quickly. But in terms of regular, I'm going to do an hour in Norwalk, Connecticut this Saturday at 6 p.m. It's at a bowling alley. 25% capacity. I think it's going to be 25 people spread out. So this is my first 45 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe they'll let me do what I want in a long time. I have so many fucking ideas I want to work. They know me well enough, they've seen me do well enough that I'm going to bring a notepad on the stage. I know how to not lose the audience because I'm staring at a notepad. I've been doing it long enough to just have it there to remind me of some ideas I want to explore. So many people are against notepads on stage, and it's reasonable for many reasons. You get a lot of new comics that do it. More comics my age use their phones, honestly, and they go on stage and all of a sudden they're looking at their phone and they've lost the audience, or it's the sense of if you bring that up there, you're signaling to the audience you're not a professional. I say fuck that. As long as you're killing, no one has ever cared. I know comics who chew gum on stage who murder. No one brings it up. No one cares because they're murdering. So I'm aware enough that I know clubs that I would never, if I ever, got an audition at the Comedy Cellar, I'm not going to bring up a fucking notepad for sure. But if it's a place that they respect me and they know that I'm there to put on a good show, I love bringing up a notepad. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I think if you want to be a stand-up comic who really is creating new material, it's a great to figure out a way to have a notepad, occasionally check it in a way that you keep the show rolling well. And I think I have that skill. But I certainly know plenty of people who will sound off on Facebook or Twitter being like, fucking comics bringing up their notepad, it's so unprofessional. And I'm like, did you know Sarah Silverman had a notepad for her last Netflix special? She's amazing. Would you say that to her? Or do you just say it to people that you have power over? It's all about doing well with the audience. Who gives a fuck what else? So to answer your question, I do like to bring up a notepad. This 6 p.m. show, I'm going to be going all over the map. I have not done this kind of time in so long. I have the time to do some stuff that kills, go into something so new it could bomb, go back to A material. I'm going to try to have a fucking blast and walk away feeling like I learned a lot. I want to walk away from that set and feel the need to run to my laptop and change things and feel like, oh yes, I figured this one out. That's the best. That's the highlight for me, stand-up wise.
And the Norfolk, Connecticut gig, how do you get out there? You take the train, you drive out there? I mean, is this one of those gigs where...
This is a train. A Metro North, pretty smooth. One of my biggest weaknesses as a comic is I can't drive. I just was terrible as a kid, and I never learned. So I might have to learn now, because I was getting to a point where I was like, I guess I'll just be a headliner, and my feature will always drive. And now I'm like, I may not be a headliner for some time now. Better learn how to fucking drive. but I'll get the gigs. If I have to transfer on 3 buses, I'll fucking figure it out.
I mean, I know for myself when I think about like the idea of like, you know, getting in front of an audience again with or without a mic, depending on what I'm doing. You know, it's just like I just think about how precious it will feel compared to the past 30 years where, you know, it had its waves of this is amazing, we've got another show, I can't believe I get to do this, you know. So, I mean, that must be a nice feeling just to get a mic and get up in front of an audience and look out and see some people and say something.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I feel I was supposed to do a show today. It got canceled because no one came. It's you do try to savor it. It's hard because I feel like this week for whatever reason I mean a lot of the outdoor shows were canceled. So Saturday I got to do 3 shows, and it feels like those 3 show days are about to be long gone. And it's weird because I feel rusty. I just feel rusty. Because there's no way for me to recreate the circumstances I had right now of doing 5 shows a night and being able to walk on stage with my anxiety not going up the same as me walking into my bedroom. That's what's amazing about performing when you're able to find like a club that you can perform at 5 times a night, is that you start to get the skill to be able to walk on stage and not feel your blood pump and not feel your heartbeat. And that's gone. So I go on stage and I feel those nerves. And I feel those nerves that I hadn't felt since year 1, and the hand kind of shaking a little. And I'm just trying to accept or not beat myself up for that which I can't control, and just like make sure I take my time on stage to like to revel in it, to be like, fuck man, there was a moment there where I didn't know if I'd be doing stand-up until 2021 or 2022, and let's like look at these audience members in the eyes and like make a connection. So I'm trying to savor it, man. It's really trying to value it. That's not my greatest skill as a person, but I'm trying to more and more.
And who are some of the stand-ups that not only throughout history but in modern times that you really enjoy watching and learning from and just laughing?
I think the more I do stand up, the more like the reason I like an Anthony Jeselnik is like I start to admire the really tight jokes, the element of like charisma or like act outs. They don't move me as much as seeing like a piece of writing that I'm just like, fuck, that is so good. What a genius gem of a sentence you put together. So I mean, John Mulaney will always be one of the greatest to me. Jeselnik. I think like Roy Wood Jr., who's on The Daily Show, is like one of these comics who I'll still be on lineups with, or I still might meet, but I'm like, he is a genius. Maria Bamford, I love. And then I'm fortunate where I'm performing with a lot of people in my class, as we kind of refer to ourselves as a class of like when you started, or my class or the class above, that I get to perform with all the time. There's a comedian named Renan Hirschberg who's older than me. He's been doing it longer, but he has bits that are astounding, and I get to do a lot of shows with him. And I get to show up, and I don't always stay and watch the whole show, but if Renan's there, I always watch him because I'm like, he's amazing. I think he's a genius, and it's very cool to be at a level where people who might consider me their peer, I'm performing with them, and and I look up to them and I work with them, and that's a good place to be in life.
Well, the time has flown by. I'm sorry I kept you so long, but it's interesting to me in this pre-COVID world. You're somebody who I knew by face, I knew your name, but then there was that period of time where you got your pants ripped sitting on those chairs that had the screw going in too far, and then and then it happened a second time, and I'm like, this is becoming like a reality, an improv your life, comedy theater reality show. The same guy. I ripped his pants twice, and at that time we just, find out how much his pants were and write him a check.
It was very appreciated.
But those things happen all the time. But you never, you don't think, you're gonna chat with someone for a bit. But like I said, Bonnie Q has been helping me, and then she told me about your special. I saw it. She reached out, and I thank you for your time, man.
It was my pleasure. It was nice to talk to a fellow artist.
And I'd love to, hopefully we're trying to get the pit loft at a place where we can actually go in person, sit down 6 feet apart, and maybe we can have another conversation in person.
I'd love to do it. I'd love to be back at the pit loft. It would be surreal. It would be really nice to be there.
I'm just trying to figure out, for myself, like I said, this whole, calling people and talking to them was born out of the virus, because I don't think I would have called any of the people I've called and said, hey, can you talk for a little while? Because it just wasn't my thing. And it was like, why do whatever this is called, a podcast? Because everyone's doing a podcast. But then post-COVID, I'm like, everyone's doing a podcast. And, it had to be something that I wanted to do because I was interested in, the journey, the bifurcation points, the moments of grace, and then kind of like the inside baseball part of it that I was always intrigued by. I feel like I'm someone who's got a chance to do a lot in the past 30 years, but still I'm a student of the craft. I actually got this thing from B&H, this thing called the Roadcaster, because I had to record this gig that I got where my agent said the client wants to hire you, but you have to get professional equipment because you're doing it from home. You can't do it with what you were doing. You're, plug in a USB into a computer. So I went out and I got this thing, but I didn't use it tonight. Tonight I'm just talking to you on a handheld black phone that's plugged into my iPhone. So I get that feeling of holding a receiver, talking to somebody.
I hear that.
And that, I just thought, should I use the new thing? It's got all these bells and whistles. It's got applause and sound and this. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to I just want to keep it simple. I just want to talk to him on the phone, just using an old-timey phone and just not get caught up in, what am I going to hit the applause button? Maybe that's a different show. But thank you, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate what you've done for the pit and doing shows there and with Uncle Function, and hopefully someday it'll be back. And please let me know if there's any way I can help you, and we'll try to post this so citizens can listen to this and hopefully watch Shelf Life.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Good to talk to you.
You too. Take care. I hope so too. Take care. Have a good night.
Bye.
Hello. That was Gianmarco Soresi. Very nice young man. Very talented stand-up. As he mentioned, we talked about, he's got a show on Amazon called Shelf Life. It's a half-hour stand-up special done on a rooftop in New York City in the midst of the pandemic. It is definitely worth a watch. He is up and coming. He loves stand-up comedy. He is a good stand-up comic. He understands the art form that it is. One human, a mic or no mic, talking to a group of people, trying to make them laugh and maybe think. So I thank you for listening to this. Wherever it finds you, I will say good morning or good afternoon or good night or sweet dreams. I hope you're doing okay. I hope this finds you okay, and I hope you're doing all right physically, mentally, emotionally, health-wise. And I hope to someday see you again, IRL, in real life, as the people say. But for now, hopefully this will suffice. Please check out thepit-nyc.com for all online classes and updates on what we're doing and trying to stay in the moment. As Gianmarco said, we have basically been told we're not going to be allowed to do live theater until June of 2021. So
each and every one of us who does something like this will have to find ways to be of purpose. Because right now, we're not really able to get up on stage the way we once used to. Also, you can check out my website, Ali Reza Faranakian. I have to spell it out. ALIREZA. F is in Frank, ARA, H is in Harry, N is in Nancy, AKIAN is in Nancy.com. All right. Take care of yourself. Be good to yourself. Be good to others, and stay healthy. And if you're not healthy, then get healthy. And once you get healthy, then stay healthy, because true wealth is health. All right. Take care and be well, and spread the word.
Thanks for listening to Global Comedy Studios. Is this a bad time to talk? Stay tuned for more.